close call between the two for me. I had met them back in the day a few times, but we didn't really know each other, and they probably didn't really remember me. But I got to know Eddie pretty well from doing this book. He was one of the earlier people I reached out to, and he was always really gracious. He was always willing to chat me up as much as I needed. And we did a couple phone interviews. And then the band played Gilman. And I described that Gilman show in the book in the beginning of that chapter. Yeah. So he's like, come. And actually, there was a couple shows I came and saw them in the area. And he was always like, come on down, you're on the guest list. And we got to talk and become more friends there. And it was interesting is that Gilman show he was the one for the show. He told me all about what was happening in LA at the time and still happening, the scene in East LA and stuff like that, where there were these 3,000 plus kids coming to ska festivals that were mostly homegrown scene, bands from Mexico also, and some bands from other parts of the U.S. And that was the first indication I had gotten from that. Like that was in like 2015 or something like that. And that led me down a path to learn a lot more about that scene.
Yeah, I was gonna say too. I know that's at the end, but that's the scene I grew up in. Like the immediate scene I grew up in, and I definitely want to personally thank you for even shining a light on that scene.
Oh, for sure.
Especially all the work that Clemente's been doing with the Evacore. He's been putting in mad work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He said something in there that kind of like maybe will kind of tie into my next point, and it's just kind of something that's always been thrown at this scene. We understand the basis for why, but we think some of it's a little unnecessary. When he was talking about La Resistencia being denied certain shows because they don't do Spanish rock, in that last chapter, I know we're jumping around, but in that last chapter, you also make a point where you're saying you're not a fan of like the whole wave designations, but if you were to say where the fourth wave was, it's Mexican ska scene or the Spanish ska scene in general. Yeah. And a while back, my friend posted a meme in that "What do you know about skapunk" group? And it pretty much, the meme was saying the only reason why the Latin ska scene hasn't been recognized by the fourth wave is because it's not overridden by the Anglo-American scene. I'll give you another example. 2011, 2012, I remember there was a show going on at Cobalt Cafe, and we brought some of our friends out from Burbank to come see us, and it was a whole like skacore show. And they were at the show, they paid to get in, but between every like break, when they're hanging out with us and stuff, it was like, yeah, man, this stuff isn't real ska, man. These kids just like Viernes 13, and like they started like, you know what I'm saying? Like they started like kind of like mocking like the Spanish ska bands. And I remember at one point there was like some Facebook page at a while ago. I can't remember which one it was, but it was clearly a page that didn't like necessarily listen to Spanish ska, and it had a list of like a bunch of like really admirable, staple ska bands, and it was like, this is real ska. Then on the other side said, this is hipster bullshit, and it was a bunch of like the LA ska bands.
Hipster? That's so weird.
Yeah, I mean, so we understand why, it's not like so like recognized by our American friends because the language barrier, that's like super understandable. But even just like not even Spanish ska, I mean, the Indonesian ska scene is huge. You know what I'm saying? There can be a lot to be said about the Japanese ska scene, Is there maybe like, because it's happening now, I'm seeing bands kind of like collaborate with now, but over the years, it's always been kind of like a separation.
Yeah. I'll address that. I think that one of the things that's been true about American mainstream culture for as long as I've been aware of it, when it comes to music and other stuff as well, is that it's very self-centric, and English is so important to American pop culture. And it's not like that in other countries. And that's what's weird. Like, we are so unaccepting of pop music that is not sung in English. Like the bands that are from other countries that have had huge hits in the US, they sing in English.
Right.
And that's how they become big pop hits. So it's not surprising to me that it's hard for the mainstream culture or even the underground culture to acknowledge Spanish music.
Yeah.
But although that is changing to some degree, not just ska. Like I've seen in the last decade, because the music in LA, the Spanish music in LA is so cool and is so diverse, and is probably more vibrant than a lot of other scenes in LA. You're starting to see a little bit of a trickle in popular culture, starting to acknowledge and accept that.
Oh, yeah.
I can't, the names of these bands are escaping me off the top of my head, but I mean, I've seen them addressed in other areas as like, this is, cool music coming out of LA. You're starting to see it in even like music publications and stuff.
Yeah.
the ska scene, that's the weirdest one to me, because it's the one scene that's the most similar to the non-Spanish scene. Like the ska music coming out of LA, there's a few things I would say that are different. Like there's more interest in metal than outside of that scene, but otherwise it's, not that different. It's the same influences, right? It's like some bands are into Jamaican ska, some bands are into two-tone, some bands are into punk ska, some bands are into all kinds of experimental stuff. So all these kids should be into it. And I think hopefully more awareness gets drawn out. But I think a lot of kids just aren't aware of what's happening. And I think the fact that it's so centralized in LA, I know that it exists in other cities that have Latinos, but LA is like a whole unique subculture. And I think that if you don't live in LA, you don't necessarily know what's going on in LA.
True. Yeah. It's very true. It's definitely.
Oh, can I just say too, speaking of the LA scene, that Clemente Ruiz, the guy behind Evocore, the main guy doing this stuff, he deserves so much credit for everything he's done in that scene. He's an amazing dude. And he's also helped my book tremendously. Like he helped me with that whole last chapter. He helped connect me with the bands in Mexico, because I didn't have any in with the actual bands in Mexico. And he got on the phone with people. He said, this guy's doing this book, work with him. He's a great guy. He definitely gave me all the credit I needed to make that chapter. And that's tough when you're dealing with bands from a totally different country, many of whom don't speak very good English. So I just wanted to give him a shout out for everything he's done for my book. Yeah,
for sure. I mean, like, for example, you just said a lot of like the Spanish music in LA, a lot of those scenes are a little more vibrant than other scenes. And I agree. For example, the stuff that Clemente is doing, it shows, like how you just said, it'll be thousands and thousands of kids packed out. And even if it's just like a random venue show, it's still at least a good like 200-300 heads there.
I think that like people outside of that scene, if they see it, like Adam in Omnigon, just before lockdown, he went down to LA and he played a few shows. And one of the shows he played was one of those show from that scene. It wasn't Clemente's show, but it was from that scene. And when he got back, he was just raving about it. Like he just couldn't stop talking about how amazing that scene was, and he just wanted to go back and play more of the shows, and they loved him. They were so welcoming to him and Omnigon in general. So I think if more people saw it, they would totally, completely embrace it. More people within the larger ska scene of the U.S.
Yeah, most definitely. Kind of moving on, kind of to circle back, I wanted to know, man, for the Synth Pop Festival, did Jeff really shave his mohawk and pin it to the wall when he went into cadet training?
Yes, he did.
That's hilarious, man.
This was the funny thing about it is the whole time he was in Flat Planet, his career path was to be a cop.
Okay.
So that was something he was always going to do. However, as the band got going and we started having those conversations about like, we should try to make it, we should try to make this band be our thing. That's where he was like, okay, well, if this band makes it, I won't be a cop.
Yeah.
And then eventually when the band kind of gets to that point where it's obvious that we all have to get jobs, that's when he kind of went back towards that career path of copness. And I didn't see it. I didn't witness it firsthand, but I heard about it. I heard that he shaved off his mohawk and taped it to his wall. And I just assumed that he cried. I don't know if he did.
That's hilarious, man. So to kind of touch on that point, when right now you're talking about, we should try and make this band our thing. And then it got to the point where you guys are like, man, we got to get jobs. Could you maybe speak on that experience, maybe for the people that are listening? Because, there's a lot of listeners out there that are in bands, but they haven't actually taken the initiative to, tour and try to get their names out there. Like when I was reading a lot of the Flat Planet stuff, you guys did a lot of touring, and that's like the step that I feel like everybody in the band wants to take, but they're always kind of afraid of what you're talking about those circumstances of like, okay, will my job let me go on tour? Will I still have a job when I get back? Do I need to look for another job?
It's a tough call. I don't know that if I can totally speak on what bands need to do now. Back in the 90s, gas was really cheap. People bought CDs and merchandise from bands. So you could, if you toured enough and if you had enough of a fan base, you could eke out a living and not be on the radio, not even be super popular. There was enough maneuverability there. I know that things are a little different now in terms of how expensive touring is and that people don't buy music as much. However, I don't know. I think putting your all into it, if you're serious about it, is a good thing. I live in Sacramento. I'm a music journalist, as well as, writing this book. And this kid named Hobo Johnson came out of our scene in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Right. You probably heard him.
Most definitely.
I knew him before he got big because I covered the music here, or at the time I was, and I interviewed him, first interview he did. And I remember he got to a point where he became really popular in town, and he kept like hoping to have that breakthrough to be nationally popular. And he was kind of getting frustrated. And I had this conversation with him, and I was like, you got to go tour. I had the 90s mindset. I was like, you got to go tour. You got to be punk rock.
Yeah.
And then, cut to some months later, he had a viral hit and he became a sensation. Yeah. So I was completely wrong. Like, my 90s mindset wasn't in tune to the current mindset.
Right.
He had a viral hit, and then he built an entire career out of that. And he's been able to sustain that career from that viral hit. So I don't know. I wouldn't ask my opinion on how to make it as a band right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I guess more of what I was looking for is kind of like the experiences in terms of like, when was there ever moments where there was, the straw that broke the camel's back? Was there ever like just frustrating?
Yeah. I mean, what happened to us was we started to lose members, and that just totally sucked out our stream. So we did 3 tours as on the first tour we had a different trombone player, and then he quit. We replaced him. That didn't really take away any of our momentum. Mm-hmm. And then the next 2 tours we had the same lineup, 6-piece band. It's the one I described in the book. That was the core band, and I think that was our best version of the band as well. During that 3rd tour, and by the way, I booked the tours, and I was most happy with that 3rd tour. I had wrapped my head around how to book tours, good DIY tours, so we didn't have days off. We were playing pretty good shows, DIY shows. We made a little bit of money on the tour, not a lot, but I was feeling okay. I'm figuring out how to do this properly. Yeah. And then midway through the 3rd tour, our guitar player told us that he had already been thinking about this and that he was going to quit the band because he wanted to move to Oregon and he had other plans. He's one of my closest friends. It wasn't anything like a personal thing. It was just his life path was going a different direction.
Of course.
And that just was kind of like a domino that we could never really recover. I mean, we replaced him. Actually, we replaced him with Adam Davis. Nice. But then we lost our bass player, and then one of our horn players took over on bass as we looked for a bass player. It just really sucked the momentum out. And then I ended up kind of getting frustrated, and I ended up quitting. Mm-hmm. And then, so that, I mean, we couldn't hold the band together, but I was ready to push us into that next direction of we had done just 3-week tours. I was ready to start booking like 1 to 2 month tours. I was ready. We had a full length that we recorded that we didn't release because of what happened. So I was ready to go that route, but you need a full band to be on the same page. I think that's definitely a thing about being in a band. Everybody has to be on the same page.
Yeah, because if it's 1 or 2 people pushing it, unless it's like a situation where it's sustainable, economically for them, it's always going to fall apart. I agree.
If you say like, if 2 or 3 members of the band say, I'm going to make this my life priority, and then the other 3 are like, I'm into the band, but I have 2 or 3 priorities above this, I think that you have not a very good chance of making it.
Yeah, most definitely.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. And then, just move along another way. Will we ever get to see a Flat Planet reunion aside from the one in Oaxaca?
We've all talked about it, so I think it's possible. And I hope that like the fact that my book comes out and talks about us, that will like move it in that direction so we can do like a reunion show or a couple shows, which I think would be fun to do.
For sure. Yeah, man. Definitely. I know it's kind of hypothetical being the current situation with live events, but if things ever go back to normal, man, come down to LA, man. We want to see you guys.
Oh yeah, for sure. I'd love that.
So book your own fucking life. That was my favorite chapter out of the book for sure.